Hi, everyone. Welcome to Conversations Over Coffee with me, Rabbi Steve Wernick. Today, I am excited to welcome Jennifer Glied-Goldstein to the conversation. But before we get to that, we're on Facebook, YouTube, and betsedek.tv. If you like today's conversation, don't forget to give a thumbs up and share with your friends. Comments are always appreciated and help us get the conversation to more people. If you have any questions for our guests, please put them in Facebook or YouTube in the chat sections, and we'll do our best to bring them into the show. With that out of the way, let me introduce Jennifer to y'all. Jennifer is a real estate lawyer at Aird Berlis. She is also a member of Bet Tzedek, grew up at Bet Tzedek, and a cousin to our very own Rabbi Friar Batson. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. Jennifer and I are going to be talking about a fascinating trip that she organized for her friends to Israel a few months ago, a year ago. When was the trip?
It was just this past summer in July.
So really just this past summer, just a few months ago. Before we get to that, tell us a little bit, Jennifer, about who you are and how you grew up. And especially, I was fascinated by the conversation that we had in preparation for today about your feelings and interactions with your Jewish education.
Okay. So I grew up in Toronto and I did 14 years of Jewish education. So I went to Bialik Hebrew Day School and then I went to Chat where I learned Hebrew and I studied Jewish history. And as I had mentioned to Rabbi Wernick, I really resented everything that I was learning. I resented my parents for making me go to Chat and go to Bialik. I wanted to be exposed to different people with different values and different lives. And it took me a very long time to come full circle and be incredibly grateful that I had that education and incredibly happy to have learned a new language. I'm even doing Duolingo right now. So trying to get back to my Hebrew language, but it wasn't until I went to Western in university and started Ivy that I, for the first time, had non-Jewish friends. And meeting them and seeing what their lives were like, I loved to learn about it, but it also made me feel a lot more connected to my Jewish roots and very excited to share that with other people. So, as opposed to being ashamed or embarrassed or feeling like it was forced down my throat for once in my life, I was really excited to bring challah to my friends or invite them to a Shabbat dinner and be able to show this unique aspect of my life.
Why do you think it was going to university and having those experiences that suddenly you started to appreciate your own Jewish education and upbringing in a different way?
I think a big part of it is that Jewish culture is, I mean, there were two things. So, firstly, Jewish culture is very family oriented, and a lot of the values are about helping others and doing things out of the goodness of your heart and being close to your family and respecting your elders. And as I was exposed to other people, I realized that that was actually pretty unique to find. And so I guess I started to come back to those values and really wanted to keep them in my life. And I think another part of it was when both of my grandfathers passed away, I felt really I felt that it was really important to carry on their traditions. And I guess that's also a Jewish value that you feel connected to your family roots. But it was really important for me to continue their legacy and to honor them. And I think that really pushed me forward.
When you think about that sense of responsibility for carrying legacy, um, does having the type of intensive Jewish experience that you had, does that make it easier, you think? Or would it have mattered for you?
It definitely makes it easier. At the time, I thought what I was learning was ridiculous. I thought the fact that I had a dual curriculum was a waste of time, that I wasn't focusing on the right things. In retrospect, I do have a deep understanding of the foundations of Jewish history and the Arab-Israeli conflict that I'm able to bring into conversations. And I know that on university campuses, it gets very contentious. And so I do feel that I was prepared for that. That being said, I think a lot of my knowledge was supplemented when I became passionate on my own. So my boyfriend, for example, did not go to a Jewish day school, but he chose to learn about it. So I think you can become a strong advocate and you can learn either way, but it definitely helped to have the foundational knowledge.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the experience on the university campus that you had as it related to Israel and the conflict and anti-Semitism. What was your experience? And just remind everyone of the name of the campus that you went to.
I went to Western, and to be completely honest, I didn't experience very much anti-Semitism there at all. I didn't really see any BDS protests, although I know they happen. The one there were two things that I found a little bit unsettling. The first is that I remember taking an international criminal law course at Western Law. I did Western for my undergrad and for law school. Um, and at my professor was a perfectly respectable, great professor, but I remember I wanted to write about Israel in this international criminal law course. And my parents, after speaking with them, advised me against it. And they felt that I might not be judged or graded fairly because of this. And that stuck with me. I still wrote the paper. I did fine. Um, but I definitely was conscientious of the fact that my opinions may be judged differently by a professor. And then the other thing, which isn't necessarily on Western campuses, but more within my phone, is that have seen, especially in May 2020, when there was the war going on in Israel, a ton of posts that really reduce the issue into infographics that are incredibly anti Semitic. And what I found was that when there are issues with Palestinians, every single person that I follow from university suddenly becomes a social justice warrior. But when everything last week was going on with Kanye West, all of those people were silent. And even that, like last week, we saw celebrities for the first time speaking out, but not in the same way that you see when it's the issues about what's going on in Palestine. And that was incredibly disheartening for me because I couldn't understand why everyone decided that this was going to be the issue that they focused on. Like every single person I followed who had no idea about the history of the land or what happened or how we ended up where we were, all of a sudden felt so obliged to post on their feeds and post on their stories incredibly anti Semitic things and incredibly anti Israel things when they had no background knowledge, but it was trendy to be anti Israel. And that really scared me.
Was trendy to be anti-Israel. How did that impact your friendship group?
So I'll preface this by saying my friends are incredibly bright and smart. We all met in business school, and they're all very much so critical thinkers. And so I think that the issues that I had were mostly because my friends are critical thinkers, and as a Jew, they're not going to take everything I say at face value. And I think that's fair, and I respect that they want to be able to hear from different perspectives, but it was really hard for me, especially in May 2020, when they were seeing all of these posts online and they were urging me to look at the other perspective when I felt that what they were looking at was a really condensed version of the situation and I was offering nuance. Um, and they wanted to understand. They really, really wanted to understand, but they didn't want to be biased and they didn't want to just agree with me because I was Jewish. And they knew that they had a lot to learn, but it was still incredibly challenging. They would take Bella Hadid's posts, for example, and try to use that in conversation with me. And I found it very upsetting because I thought that was also biased. And a lot of her posts were used to call Israel an apartheid state with no explanation of what an apartheid state even is. And I think a lot of people that use this word apartheid state don't even know what it means. So that was really hard for me.
And so what you were clearly inspired to do something about it. What was the source of that inspiration? Did you have like an aha moment? Um, how'd you get to your very interesting solution?
So my boyfriend had gone to Israel with three of his non-Jewish best friends several years ago, and they had become the biggest Israel fans. And so when I was getting really upset about it, my boyfriend was like, "You should take your friends, like, let them understand." And one thing that I found pretty interesting is when I presented the idea to my friends, they were so excited. They wanted to go so badly, but they felt like Israel was sort of an unattainable place to go. They didn't think that non-Jews could go, which I found crazy, but they've said to me
Yeah,
since our trip.
Christian pilgrims dwarf Jewish pilgrims in terms of their visits to Israel.
They would just be like, "Oh, I would never have gone to Israel by myself. I wouldn't have felt comfortable. It didn't feel right." And now they're like, "Oh, we're going to go back to Israel. We're going to take our families to Israel." Um, but so they were really excited to go, but they wanted to have me, who I spoke Hebrew to a degree, and I had family there, and I was able to be their guide in a sense. And so when I presented it, they were very excited to go, and they didn't just wanna go and sit on the beach in Tel Aviv, they wanted to tour, they wanted to see everything, and they wanted to learn, which was extremely exciting for me.
So tell us a little bit about your friendship group. How many people are here? Um, are we talking about a mixed gender group? Uh, you know, tell us a little bit about the background of the people that you took with you.
Okay, so I went with 7 girls, and most of them are actually Italian Roman Catholic. The rest are Christian. Those were and they were all girls. 2 of them went to law school with me, and 4 of them went to business school with me, and one was my cousin came for a bit as well.
Um, so what you went over the summer.
Yeah.
How long did you go for?
It was a little complicated because some were coming at different times and going. It was about 2 weeks in total with different people showing up on different days.
So
It's hard when everyone works.
yeah, but still. And so tell us a little bit about the itinerary. Where did you go? How did you, you know, how did you envision it? Did you have a specific goal in mind, or it was just kind of like, here's Israel and let's talk about it?
Oh, I had a goal. Um, I absolutely wanted them to fall in love with Israel, but most importantly, understand why Jews need Israel. I don't know if I mentioned, but I'm the grandchild of 2 Holocaust survivors, and so the Holocaust has played an incredibly dominant role in my life. I used to joke with my mom that not a day went by without us talking about the Holocaust at the dinner table. It just became so every day. And so the first thing I did was book our visit to Yad Vashem with a private guide. So it was really important for me that they understood. I mean, especially since so many of them are Roman Catholics, most countries and most cities and provinces abide by Catholic rules in the sense that Saturday and Sunday is our weekend and we get Easter Monday off. We would never get the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah off or Yom Kippur off, but their holiest holiday is Easter and they get it off. And so I really wanted them to be able to see that difference and the importance of a Jewish state. Um, I also have a tour guide. His name is Izat. And I used him when I went with my family, and he is an Arab Bedouin. And I thought it would be really interesting for them to tour with someone that wasn't Jewish because he was able to offer them a different perspective on the conflict and the land. And so that was really great. So we started and we did Mitzpe Ramon, which was just a beautiful experience. And I think that was really exciting for them to see. And then we went to Jordan for a day, 2 days and one night. And going to Jordan really, I believe, showed them the difference in the quality of life in Israel and how safe they felt in Israel. I know that they felt pretty nervous crossing the border to Jordan, and our experience in Jordan was unbelievable. I highly recommend it to anybody. We stayed in
Where did you go? Petra and Amman, or just
Petra
Amman
and Wadi Rum.
and Wadi Rum?
Yeah, and we stayed in these bubble tents in Wadi Rum, and it looked like you were in Mars because they're like these massive bubbles all across the very red desert. It was such an incredible experience. You can see all the stars at night. It's awesome. But it allowed them to have like a little bit of a compare and contrast. Then we went back to Israel and we did Tel Aviv. We did 2 days in Jerusalem, and then we went back to Tel Aviv. I think one thing that was really interesting was right when we got to Tel Aviv, we were staying in Jaffa and we went for lunch. And during lunch, one of the mosques, you could hear people praying. And I remember my friend looked at me and said, "There are mosques in Israel? Like how can you hear praying like this?" And I was like, "Because Jews and Arabs live together here." And immediately her perspective changed. Like she didn't realize that you could get to Israel and you wouldn't just see Israeli influence.
That 20% of the population is Muslim.
Yeah. Like she just expected everything would be of Jewish influence and didn't realize that there was so much Christian and Arab influence all throughout the country. Because again, you see on social media, it's an apartheid state. They are trying
Where
to
were you eating
ethnically
in Jaffa?
cleanse.
Dr. Shakshuka?
No. Abu Hassan. Have you ever been?
Yes.
It's the best hummus in all of Israel.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. I believe it's also Arab run.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was a really good experience to have. And like I could tell her entire opinion shifted that quickly. So then we went to Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, for the first time, I did a Christian tour of Jerusalem because they wanted to see all of these different Christian holy spaces. So we saw the church where Jesus was resurrected and we saw Jesus' grave. And firstly, they were incredibly excited. Like it was just so cool for them to see these different things. But they were able to see that so closely to the Western Wall, Israel's also preserving the tomb of Jesus and the Church of Resurrection, and all of these places are valued and cared for. And then we went to Jericho for a day, which was great. We went to go see the Jordan River and we stopped for lunch in Jericho. And I think that was the biggest shift for them because they had this impression that people living in Gaza and the West Bank were living in destitute. They were all on the ground, sleeping on the ground, homeless, starving. They thought that they were being treated horribly. And we went to Jericho and they saw businesses that were thriving and people walking the streets, and it was safe. And we sat down and we had lunch with all of these Arabs that lived in the West Bank and shared a meal together, and everyone was friendly. And then we went to the Jordan River, which was, they all took water bottles home, which was really cute. But after that, they were sort of like, we don't understand. Why does everyone say it's an apartheid state? Why does everyone say that Israel's doing all of these horrible things? And so I was lucky because I had given them a bit of the history, but this time the Arab Bedouin tour guide that we had gave them the history from his perspective, and it completely aligned with mine. And having been able to see the different spaces and see Jews and Muslims and Christians living alike and Bedouins living together, and then going to the West Bank and seeing that the people in the West Bank are free to operate and live their lives, they were they became advocates for
To
the
be
Jewish
fair
people.
though, to be fair though, Jennifer, you went to Jericho and not to Hebron,
Yes.
right? And you didn't go to Jenin in Gaza.
Yes.
um, and for those that are watching that might not be um, aware, the Israel is that the charge of apartheid means that you have a different set of legal rules for people based on either religion or the color of their skin, and they're different underneath the eyes of the law. In Israel itself, there's no apartheid because every Israeli citizen, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, atheist, is equal underneath the law. Um, there is a challenge of the extension of Israeli law to Israelis that live in the West Bank, and and the lack of that same equal extension to Palestinians that live in the West Bank. But at the same time, what people don't understand is in the West Bank, when it comes to everything other than security issues, it's the Palestinian Authority that is the legal system. So the
Mhm.
Palestinians are responsible to Palestinian law. So the charge of apartheid is ridiculous in that regard. Doesn't mean that Israel's not at risk of apartheid with regard to the West Bank. It's a very, very complicated circumstance. But I just want to make sure that people that are following that you and I are speaking code already, right? So I want to just express more clearly what that meant. And for anybody who's watching who's not familiar, Gaza, other than the security issues, and yes, there is a blockade, and people can have reasonable debates over whether or not that blockade is the best strategy in order to achieve the circumstances. But Gaza is completely under Hamas rule in terms of its day-to-day legal apparatus and so forth and so on, and continues to smuggle in the materials for building tunnels in order to attack Israelis and to fire missiles indiscriminately at civilian population centers. So that's for those that are watching that might not understand the details of what we're talking about. That's a little bit more explanation. Um,
Well, sorry, just to
Go ahead.
cut in. I think one thing that's also important for me to say is I don't want anyone, and especially not my friends, to just blindly support everything that Israel does. And I made that clear to them, although I know I don't have to because they're smart and critical thinkers. And the fact that they were so open to going to Israel and doing all of this, they're not going to see something that the government did and now automatically agree with it because there are so many issues. And you can be Zionistic and pro Israel and support the Jewish people and their need to have Israel and still be critical of the government and critical of the decisions that are made. And so
And,
that
and
is
nobody's and
definitely,
nobody's more
yeah,
critical of the Israeli government than Israelis themselves,
yeah, exactly.
as by the fact that tomorrow is the fifth election in 3 years, right? And there are a lot of issues to be concerned about as an Israeli, as a Zionist, about Israel. But I think part of the message that you wanted them to understand is that Israel's a normal country in that way.
Hmm.
There's lots of things that we are critical about the Canadian government for. There's lots of things that Americans are critical of the American government for. We don't even have to get into a conversation about Russia at this moment. But what I heard you say the beginning of the conversation was that you were concerned that everybody is just they're getting on the bandwagon of anti-Zionism hate without understanding any of the issues and relying on people that don't necessarily understand the issues either in
Hmm.
the way in which they do that. What are some of the ways in which you can um, I know you're not measuring the impact of this trip, but what are some of the ways in which, now 3, 4 months later, you see the impact of this trip on your friend?
Well, I mean, this was actually pretty immediately after. So our trip ended and we went different ways. And then I actually went back to Israel when there was the brief conflict. And this time, when that conflict happened, my friends were reaching out to me already, being like, I mean, one thing I found funny was that my friends instantly asked why Israel wasn't more offensive and felt that Israel should be
They asked
more
why Israel wasn't more offensive.
like on the offense as opposed to the defense.
Oh,
Like why Israel doesn't just go and fight and like force this upon everyone because they realized that like Israel would defend themselves and they would look bad. So if Israel's going to defend themselves and look bad, why not at least take the offensive route? Um, and so when the conflict arose again, they were instantly reading the headlines, being like, okay, give us more information here. Like, what are people saying in Israel? Why did Israel blow up this facility? What was the real reason? And they didn't find it wrong that Israel might have like targeted a facility because they now had a better understanding of why it was so important for them. They were also amazed by the Iron Dome and
did
finally
did did
understood.
that did they witness that by any chance while they were there by the Iron Dome?
No, no. So
Did you
it
go and
was
visit?
very
Did you go
safe
visit
while
a
they were
site?
there. No. But I
See,
did make
see,
them
next
watch
time you go,
videos.
you got to let me know because I got some juice. I'll make sure you and your friends you get to see what's going on.
Okay, okay. Um, I mean, they're all gonna wanna go back. They all wanna take their boyfriends, they wanna show their families, so I don't think it's a one-time trip for anyone. But, I showed them videos of the Iron Dome, and they were also like, the fact that Israel has an Iron Dome doesn't change the fact that the news should be reporting on the missiles being shot into Israel. Like, why is there such a gap? I also think something they struggled with and something I also struggle with is why is it trendy to hate Israel? Why do most media outlets choose to report on everything so one-sided? Why has it become, I mean, I know it's always been anti-Semitism has always been prevalent, but why has it become so trendy and so needed to hate Israel? And I didn't have a great answer for that.
Unfortunately, my answer to that is because it's no longer vogue to hate Jews. So it's easier to hate Israel because Israel becomes the international Jew.
Yeah.
And so that way you can say I'm anti-Zionist as opposed to being anti-Semitic. So like, I don't have a problem with Jews. I just have a problem with Israel. And the problem, of course, with that is that the only state for which you say that doesn't have a right to exist is the Jewish state. Right? We don't say it about China when they're dealing with the Muslims in their community, or the Russians with what they're doing in Ukraine, or the Iranians. 45 days of protests in Iran, 150 people killed. But yet Iran and Iran is the only state that says Israel doesn't have a right to exist, but nobody's saying that they don't have a right to exist, right? Because that's what happens. It's like it's no longer vogue to really be anti-Semitic, but therefore Israel and Zionism becomes the replacement.
Yeah.
And I also want to share with you just a thought that was once shared with me from one of the national security advisors of Israel as to why Israel doesn't go on the offensive. Because all the military people know that there's not a military solution to this. Israel could go into Gaza, said Yuda Amichor, who was one of the past national security advisors. Israel can go into Gaza, retake Gaza within 2 weeks, clear it out of terrorists and terrorist infrastructure within 6 months at a heavy cost, because there'll be a lot of house-to-house fighting and so forth. And so there'll be a heavy cost on both Palestinians and Israelis in terms of the loss. But then what? Then you have to occupy it and rule it again. And you're right back to where you started before. So in the interim of or in the absence of a diplomatic solution, the best you can do is every couple of years you have to fight these asymmetrical wars in order to reestablish the balance of power, and a deterrent against doing it. It's
Yeah.
a very cold, unsatisfying analysis, but it's the truth.
Makes sense.
That eventually you're not going to solve this without a diplomatic solution.
Yeah.
And from the Israeli perspective, we tried Oslo and we tried leaving Gaza. When we left Oslo, we got the second intifada and people blowing themselves on buses and restaurants. And when we left Gaza, we get missiles. So the left in Israel has been decimated, as you can see by the upcoming elections. But the right in Israel is not correct either. It doesn't work. So Israel's kind of like, still reeling from the outcome of those circumstances. And the Palestinians, Abbas is now serving the 16th year of his 4-year term. So, that's that.
Yeah.
What's next? Last word. What's next for you and your friends vis-a-vis Israel? Are you give them all Noah Tishby's book?
I actually did give a bunch of them Noah Tishby's book. It's phenomenal. I was reading it while I was there, and it has a lot of maps in it. And so they were very interested in seeing the maps and seeing the land that Israel conquered and the land that Israel gave back. Like, the wars fascinated them. I'm not sure what's next. I keep getting them involved in different initiatives. I'm organizing the Holocaust Education Week initiative at my law firm, and I definitely push the Holocaust education side on everyone that talks to me. And I'm continuing to think about different ways that I can get non-Jewish people involved in education on Israel and the Arab-Israeli conflict. So if anyone in the audience has recommendations, I'm open-minded.
Well, I'm going to send a copy of this conversation to some people that are involved in Fund Birthright, because I'm just wondering whether or not you've come up with a new type of educational advocacy tourism. And that is, just have people take their friends and go for a week or two and give them the resources to have those, varied experiences. You went to Jericho, which I think is great. There's other things that one could do and other programs that one could tie into that really could provide a nuanced kind of experience. And I just want to say, Jennifer, I was really excited when I met you and you told me about this, and I really think there's something here to share with the rest of the world. So thank you for joining me for coffee.
Thanks for having me.
Again. Thanks everyone for being with us on this edition of Conversations Over Coffee. Be sure to check Beth Tzedek's website, www.beth-tzedek.org, for all of the opportunities to engage in a meaningful Jewish life. We want to wish you a Shavua Tov, a very, very good week. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.